Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar in these troublesome times. We're excited to see so many of you joining us online from every corner of the world. For those that don't know us, you're Access Partnership, the leading public policy consultancy for the tech sector. Since 1999, we have enabled market access so companies can innovate and grow. We are uniquely positioned with expertise in policy and technology to drive value for businesses globally. Today, we will be discussing on the impact of COVID-19 on the WRC process. The World Radio Communication Conference is the ITU-led initiative that gathers national administrations and telecom industry members every 4 years to discuss the allocation of global radio frequencies and other technical standards for telecommunications. The COVID-19 illness is the first pandemic in history where technology and social media are being used on a massive scale to keep people safe, productive, and connected while remaining physically apart. Amidst all the disquiet, disruption, and distress caused by COVID-19, digital technology has emerged as the hidden hero of the crisis. If there is one thing the events of the past few months have illustrated, is the critical importance of connectivity. The impact of the pandemic has been staggered across different regions. The epicenter first struck China and neighboring Asian countries at the start of the year, quickly shifted to Europe by March, and shifted again to the Western Hemisphere, with first the United States and then Latin America experiencing a wave of infections. Nationwide lockdowns are now starting to ease in countries where the infection rates have fallen to controllable levels, and life in parts is beginning to return to some degree of normality. However, international travel remains very limited. Many national borders remain closed to non-citizens or substantial quarantine periods required upon arrival. Airlines are serving a very restricted number of international routes. Within this unique environment, multilateral organizations in particular face many operational challenges. Travel restrictions are a patchwork of different policies. The specter of a second wave of COVID-19 looms over many countries. The prospect of a vaccine remains ethereal. A return to pre-COVID ease of travel, however wishful, may not be possible for years. In response, multilateral organizations have been forced to postpone physical meetings, potentially affecting decision-making and international collaboration on a medium to long-term basis. Some organizations have adapted quickly, bringing meetings online and progressing work by remote means. Others have been resistant to fully moving online and could benefit from learning what is possible in this new environment. As with all multilateral work, it will not always be possible to reach consensus with a first attempt. Virtual meetings remove many opportunities for the offline discussions, which are sometimes vital to resolve difficult issues. But experience has shown that participants adapt quickly. Social media offers multiple tools to share and develop ideas. The natural incentive to find compromise in progressive work is not easily dulled. The established model of international travel and face-to-face meetings may be out of reach for years to come. Social distancing requirements may limit venues to smaller numbers of people, and vulnerable participants may choose not to attend such events. Virtual meetings may be the only game in town for some time. This webinar will consider how 3 multilateral organizations have adjusted to life during the pandemic and what lessons they can share from their experience. I'm Azar Zarabini, head of the IT Affairs at Access Partnership, and today I have the pleasure to moderate this webinar. Okay, we got to the right slides. So I'm joined by guest speakers, Ms. Cindy Cook. She's the chairperson of CPM23, working collaboratively with ITUR members to ensure the success of the studies leading to WRC-23. Representing Canada, she has actively participated in the work of the ITUR for over 18 years and has previously held various levels of chairing roles, including being the chairperson for the WRC-19 ad hoc group for the Declaration on Gender Equality, chair of Task Group 5-1, a vice chair of Study Group 5, chair of the WRC-15 working group, and a CPM chapter rapporteur. Cindy is the Director, International Spectrum and Standards at Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Government of Canada, where she leads spectrum-related international work, including Canadian preparations towards WRC-23. She's an electrical engineer who, in addition to the government, has also worked in the satellite and terrestrial telecom industries. Welcome, Cindy. Our second guest speaker is Mr. Tariq Al-Awadi. He's the Executive Director, Spectrum Affairs, Department of the Telecom Regulatory Authority, United Arab Emirates. Mr. Al-Awadi has 24 years of experience in spectrum management. He selected chairman of ITU World Radio Conference 2012. He headed a number of ITU groups and meetings and contributed towards ITU resolutions, recommendations, and studies. He represented the UAE in ITU, IMO, ICAO, Arab Spectrum Management Group, GCC Telecom Bureau, and a number of other international and regional forums. He's currently chairman of Arab Spectrum Management Group, known as ASMG. And our third guest speaker is Mr. Mario Manivix. Mr. Manivix was elected director of the ITU Radio Communication Bureau at the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference 2018 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. He took place on 1st of January 2019. He's an electronic engineer specialized in telecommunications. He has been with the ITU for over 30 years, where he has served in high-level management positions in the radio communication and development sectors, as well as in ITU regional offices. As director, Mr. Manivix is responsible for the management of the Radio Communication Bureau, which organizes and coordinates the work of the radio communication sector, whose aim is to ensure the rational, equitable, efficient, and economical use of the radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits. So I'll begin today by inviting Ms. Cook to take the floor. Please, Cindy.
Thank you, Azar, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this webinar. It is indeed an honor for me to be on the same panel as both Mario and Tariq, so thank you very much. I was asked to speak from the perspective of both the chairman of CPM 23, as well as from the perspective of Canada and our preparations. So on my slides, I will split that into two and start with the CPM 23 process. So this slide, I know we have seen already a lot of discussion in previous webinars around WRC-23 and the different agenda items and how those agenda items are grouped. So this is kind of a repeat of that. But what I've also added here is the responsible groups for each of those agenda items. And the reason for this is I wanted to show how our work is progressing so far. So as we can see from here with all of these groups, most of these groups have met, and Working Party 5D is currently meeting, except for the working parties of 5A, 5B, and 5C, which will meet virtually in July, as well as the new task group 6-1. It was formed in February at the study group 6 meeting, but will not meet until later. So as we can see then from this and the responsible groups that have met so far, that some of these agenda items have been kicked off. So our process for the most part has been kicked off. And because these groups have been meeting virtually, there hasn't been as much time to have some in-depth discussions. And a number of correspondence groups have been formed in order to begin the work that could not be done in the virtual meetings. One thing I would like to point out from the CPM perspective as well is the CPM management team will meet once all of the working parties, the responsible groups have met, in order to determine if any changes are needed to the Circular 251, the output from our first CPM 23-1 meeting, and in particular regarding the contributing groups to the studies. Typically, this CPM management team meeting would also set the date for the draft CPM texts to be finalized. However, that's not possible at this time which leads me to my next slide. Yeah, great, thank you. So this is the CPM dates relative to WRC-23. To set the dates for when the draft CPM text is to be finalized, we work backwards typically from the WRC. So WRC-23, the dates have not been set. I think everybody is well aware now that the UAE has kindly offered to host the WRC this time. And I'm quite excited about that. I've had very good experiences in the UAE before, having chaired a task group 5.1 meeting there. So the dates for WRC 23 will be set by Council in consultation and based on input from the UAE and from the BR. And then once we know those dates, we work backwards to set the date for CPM 23-2, so the second meeting of CPM. And this will be according to the resolution ITUR 2-8. We need to have that meeting so that the output, the final CPM text, is available in the 6 languages 5 months before the WRC. And then we work backwards from that to see what the deadline for the draft CPM text is, noting that it needs to be available to the membership with enough time for them to generate their inputs for CPM. So typically, I think it's listed 2 months ahead of time in the 6 available languages. And based on that, we set our date for the CPM management team and the date then that the texts are all due to the rapporteurs. The one thing that we do know so far is the date that was agreed for the deadline for the completion or for all of the contributing working parties to provide their parameters and characteristics for the sharing studies to the responsible groups. And that was set at the first CPM meeting, which is listed now as it's the 15th of June next year. So far, I have not been made aware of any problems or difficulties in reaching that date. It may come up depending on how long we do virtual meetings. It may be more difficult for some working parties, but at the moment, that date is still standing. So that's my update on the CPM kind of timelines and the impact. So I guess in a nutshell, we haven't seen an impact yet on the CPM dates because of COVID-19, but we will stay on top of that and see how things progress. The next slide is more on the impact of COVID-19 on preparations within Canada. So our Canadian preparations towards WRC-23 are proceeding normally. The primary impact has been that all of our meetings are now online, so they're all virtual meetings. This is because our government team members and most of our stakeholders are still working from home and have been since the middle of March. So not just the international meetings, but all of our preparation meetings are online as well. This means that for the international ones that we've had to adjust our working parties here, our working hours here in Canada, since most of the meetings are held on European time zones. That has meant that we are getting up a little bit earlier than normal. And I'd say that the biggest impact of that is on the working hours is ensuring that everybody puts that into their calendars and adheres to those. So blocking time and indicating your work hours in your calendar so your colleagues know when they can reach you and know that you're working on a different kind of time frame than they are, and ensuring that people respect those hours, and especially the participants themselves, because I think in these times it's a little bit harder for some of us to achieve work-life balance, because when we're working from home, we are working more often, even because our office is right. For some people, it's in their kitchen. So that has been a little bit of a change. CTEL has also met just to talk about our regional preparations. CTEL was the first regional group to hold a virtual meeting, and it met successfully on the 11th of May using the Kudo platform. We have our CTEL meetings with simultaneous interpretation in Spanish and English. So that was a platform that was used, and it was quite successful. Because the meeting was reduced from 4 days to 1 day, the agenda was also reduced to primarily focus on setting up the WRC-23 related work. And then on my last slide, a little bit about the impact of our Canadian participation in the ITU. I do want to say that the ITU virtual meetings have been evolving to address the different difficulties I think that people from around the world have experienced. And I'd just like to commend the ITU for being very adaptive and working quickly to adjust to that situation. Some examples being that because we're all in different time zones, to have an 8-hour meeting if you're in a time zone that's a 12-hour flip can be a little difficult. So the ITU has reduced the length of the daily meetings to make that easier for people. They've also limited the meeting time, because the meeting time is less. The agendas are becoming more focused on the work that absolutely has to be done until hopefully one day we can meet in person, or we start to adjust even more how we work. In some of the earlier meetings, there was some bandwidth issues for some of the speakers, especially when we were using video. So the current meetings are they're using audio only. For example, the Working Party 5D meeting right now. So there's been adjustments made along the way, and I'm sure there will be more as we learn whether we're going to be doing this for a long time or a short time. One of the things that has also been done is there's been a lot of correspondence groups established in order to progress the work for WRC-23 agenda items. And I guess my next kind of points are more questions around things we need to consider as we move forward in this situation. And that is, how do we contribute effectively to all of these correspondence groups that are being formed? And then as well, one of the things that we really benefit from when we have in-person meetings is informal hallway type discussions. So how do we do that in a virtual environment? A lot of times if there's a difficulty in the meeting, we can go out into the hallway in a group and resolve it very quickly. We need to find a way as we progress in how we can do that. And then one thing I did want to point out is, we don't just resolve issues in the hallways or over coffee. We also establish collegial working relationships and friendships with our international colleagues. And how do we maintain those relationships, which I think are essential to us at WRC, being able to resolve the issues and move forward and come up with compromises. It's not just something I think that we need to consider in the ITU perspective. We're also looking at that within Canada, is that in a virtual environment, sometimes our interactions with our colleagues become very transactional. And I think, we need to put a little bit of thought in, well, how do we maintain those more personal relationships and working relationships, not just with our own colleagues in Canada, but with our colleagues around the world. So that's my thoughts on how COVID-19 has impacted not just the CPM 23 process, but also our preparations within Canada. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for those valuable insights. I'd like to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please feel free to add your questions in the chat box. And after we finish our presentations, then we can start the Q&A and we can capture all those questions. So next, I'll pass the floor to Mr. Alawadi, and please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azar. It's a pleasure to meet with you all here again. And on behalf of ASMG and UAE, also I'd like to thank Access Partnership for arranging this webinar. Last week we had some similar webinar with different organizations, and I had the pleasure to meet again with my colleague Mario. It's good to see Cindy after a long time. Webinar for impact on WRC process. I would like to start first of all with regard to the hosting the next WRC-23. I think we just heard from Cindy Cook that yes, UAE has submitted a request to host the next conference in the UAE, and it will be a pleasure to see you all here in UAE with such a big conference. UAE has already experienced to host almost all of ITU conferences. Last one was PP18. Before it was WTDC 14, WICET 12, WTSA 12, and Telecom. Now this WRC. So I would like to see all you here again in UAE. But still that we are still coordinating between two Emirates, between Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Both of them, they are showing very interest to host this conference. Still, I'm working with them both. Maybe because of this also pandemic, the process is not that much and heavy load of work that everyone we have it. But I'm going back to coordinate with them. Hopefully before end of this month we will finalize and to inform ITU so the ITU can circulate a letter as per the procedure to all countries for hosting the UAE of the WRC-23. Dubai, we had all the conference in Dubai. Abu Dhabi will be first time, but it is also, they have very big conference center. I believe that who was here in the UAE have seen at this center. Go next slide, please. ASMG 26. ASMG, it is the Arab Spectrum Management Group, which established in 2001 by the ICT Council of Arab League at that at the Arab League level. Established this group to coordinate between the 22 countries for all issues related to the radio communication services and to preparation for WRCs and regional or worldwide. We had till now 26 meetings, and the good thing that maybe our regional group are the only regional group who has a chance to have physical meeting before pandemic, maybe I'm saying. And fortunately that for us that we had met in February this year, first meeting for the preparation of next conference. At that meeting, we had reviewed very quick the outcome of WRC-19, and then later we prepare ourselves, establishing the new management team. Again, I'm chairing this group, and then establish the working group, assigning each agenda item for different coordinator and working group, and we put our preliminary view or position for each agenda item. At that meeting, there were 10 administration attendant plus 14 organization and around 96. Good thing that we had that meeting also for 2 days, followed by the ASMG 5th MENA Spectrum Conference organizing by the Europe Forum. At that meeting, we had developed our paper, our contributions, our preliminary review for coming working group and parties in the ITUR study groups. And our team already started preparation and attending these meetings. Even now it is virtual, but they already attending that one and working on online, depending the Arab Spectrum Management Group position. And the next slide, please. This is showing the roadmap for ASMG. So started with the CPM 1, which was November 2019, and then we had our meeting in February. Then this is the cycle, all the cycle we are anticipating. The next ASMG meeting, it will be in first or second quarter of 2021. Then, as usual, there will be a number of ITU regional seminar or workshop organized by ITUR. So we are planning to have total 5 ASMG meeting between the cycle or for this cycle. So each quarter, every year we'll have, and the last year, 2023, we will have. I show maybe the next slide, please. In the next slide here, we will see the ASMG will have 2 meetings, one before the CPM and one after the CPM. And that is where our final position will be prepared for WRC and submit our paper to contribution to WRC. Now, this is the roadmap it shows for ASMG. Of course, we just hear about the starting process of the ITR meetings from Cindy right now. In the next slide, we'll see the next slide. Yeah, and the next slide, this slide, it shows how the impact of COVID-19 on the process of preparation for WRC-23. As per the ASMG group, and they have already started participating in different working group and seeing that still there are some delay in the start of ITR meeting for some working parties. Maybe also for some agenda item, which is related to WRC, as just we have heard from Cindy, has been kicked off to next meeting. So this is showing that there are some delay a little bit as the preparation for WRC-23, especially for agenda items. And till now, we don't know. Uncertainty, there is uncertainty for the crisis and the time. Still, we don't know when it will end. Some countries or many of countries in the world, they have started opening their offices, everything, but some other, they are talking now second wave. And many countries also has taking precautions or taking also steps for traveling. I can tell you here in the UAE and in the TRA, that in the TRA of where we are working, I'm working there, we already has taken decision that all our international meeting has been cancelled for till the end of the year. And many countries, they have done the same thing. So this year, if there will be any international meeting, I don't think that we will be able to attend it physically. So this is, I don't know how long it will take and what will be impact. So even now we can see it's talking about airplane that if they will come back, it will take time for them to return back as normal, maybe not less than 2 years. Similar, if the airplane, it will take that time, then this will impact on all other services and restaurant, hotels, and others and others. So that is also we have seen it, and we saw that how the impact of COVID-19. However, good thing that because of this COVID-19, we all of us established this kind of virtual meeting, this virtual conferences, seminars, and webinars, and it's good to see each other. However, this is have also another one drawback about the efficiency of it. You just mentioned just right now by Cindy said meeting was taking, for example, sometime 12 hours. Now it is just 3-4 hours, and it is it was first 5 days. It's not now to 3 to 4 days of time, 1 day. It cannot take him more than that. If we'd like to bring all the people from different kind of work, like this webinar, I'm sure now people who's attending right now here, for those from Far East, it is late night there right now. So it is very difficult to have these kind of meeting continue like that. And if we will don't know how long will take this COVID-19, and then we don't know how it will be the impact on the studies on different agenda items. What will be the value of it, and how the studies will be completed or not. So these kind of things we have to take into account. We just seen also some of reschedule of some conferences. For example, WTSA, which supposed to be have this year in November in India, it has been now postponed to, if I'm not wrong, in the first quarter 2021. Again, are we will be ready there that time? Will be ready that time by us? Still, we don't know, people still will have fear to travel and to go to different countries if still some action or serious action not be taken. So this we can see the impact of COVID-19. And next slide also, please. In the next slide, yeah, this is also showing some other challenges. Here that the ITU new building works will be starting to 2022. That will have any impact? Maybe, I don't know, but this is one of the other challenges we have to see it of the availability of ITU meeting room. And possible or postponing of ITU activities, as I mentioned just right now, WTSA, as there will be any impact on other conferences in the coming years, seminars or assemblies that we have to see, WSIS or WTDC next year, WTP, all those has to be reviewed. I know that in the last virtual consultation council meeting, which was held 2 to 3 weeks ago, that issue been discussed there, and it was also a request to monitor the situation all over the world and to see how we'll continue on those meetings. And the next slide, here we can see how some consideration that we can take into account to mitigate this situation. Maybe we can, first of all, from ITU, ITUR, especially my colleague Mario and his team, and also from all other countries, they have to regularly evaluate the situation and to see whether how the impact of COVID-19, what will the impact on the studies and others, and need to meet time to time. Maybe ITUR can arrange some meeting with the regional head time to time to see and evaluate the situation, and this is maybe one of the recommendation. Other thing, more bilateral, multilateral meetings of regional groups to be conducted. Let's use this kind of virtual meeting, even if it will be 1-2 days every time, but it's more that we can have it and we can select point. We don't need to go for all agenda item. One agenda item, sit together and have more frequent meeting. That maybe also one of the things can solve and help in preparation for WRC. And we are really like to use these kind of virtual meetings, but again, we have to see how often that we can use it, because the time is important, and limited discussion to the limited number of agenda, not to have more agenda this one here. So this is kind of consideration to mitigate the situation. About that done, we really appreciate for all preparation going on by all regional group, by ITUR and Cindy. We will support her also for the CPM, and in that also this kind of impact let countries to really work from home, not stop their work. In UAE, we already working on WRC issues, but we are already working in different kind of radio services. Recently, we have launched 2 consultation papers, one about 6 gigahertz and one about 600 megahertz to see how to use these bands. And most of Arab countries, they're doing the same thing. So I think this is my last slide. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Azan.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very valuable. You provided very valuable insights. So again, I'd like to ask everyone that if you have any questions, please feel free to add it in the chat box. We will capture all those questions at the end of the presentation. So now our last speaker, guest speaker, which is Mr. Manuix. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Azar. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants. Let me start by thanking the organizers, Access Partnership, for this idea and for inviting us. I'm thrilled to be here with Cindy and Tariq, who are 2 pillars of the ITUR community, and I thank them for their continuous contribution to our work. So I don't know if I have anything new to say after the two interventions, but I will try anyway. So if we start with the new slide, you know, in the ITU, we've been, let's say, working from home since mid-March. That was when the Swiss government established that nobody will be working at the office, and everybody that could work from home would work from home, and that was the case for the ITU. So despite that, we have in BR, we have continued and we have done everything in our power to keep the schedule of our activities. So the WRC-19 final acts were published on time at the end of March with no delay. We are on track in producing the 2020 edition of the radio regulations, which is the updated edition of the international framework for the use of frequencies and orbits, which will include all the changes made during WRC-19. We have no delays in the timely processing of terrestrial and satellite network filings, and we continue with our normal activity. So no impact in the BR, in the Bureau, because of COVID, and we are very happy to see how ICTs have been helping us and everybody else, as you mentioned before, to cope with this sanitary crisis and to be able to continue delivering our services to the membership. So in the next slide, we see that the BR has then kept open for business despite the COVID. And although there is no access to ITU premises, we have been, as I said, being able to keep all the services alive. This will change a bit tomorrow, in fact, the 1st of July, where, because now the Swiss government and all the European governments, as you know, have lightened the measures, and now it is possible to go to work while respecting certain measures like social distancing and masks and no meetings in crowded rooms and things like that. So, but we have decided at the ITU that as we are doing so well, there is no need to force people to go back to the office. So it's a voluntary return to the office during July and August for those that wish to go to the office, and those that are comfortable remaining at home, they can do so. So until we don't have delegates coming to the ITU, it doesn't make too much difference to be at home or to be in the office. And as Tariq mentioned, and you also, Azar, in your opening remarks, there are people that will be fearful of taking public transport or being in the streets because they have a precondition or they have a certain age. So we don't want to force anybody, and we don't see any need to do that because the circumstances allow for us to continue working like that. So in the next slide, we can see that we did this survey within the BR. This is not ITU-wide, this is the BR-wide. As you know, the BR is the most technical sector of the ITU, so these figures might not be the same in other sectors. But for 92% of our staff, the productivity level remained the same or even increased while working from home, okay? So the result is very good. And then they've seen advantages like no commuting time, which is considered as a lost time, good for the environment, and even better work-life balance while staying at home. So of course there are exceptions, and this is why 92 is there and not 100, because not everybody has a comfortable, let's say, situation at home to work from there. Some people live in small apartments and they don't have, let's say, privacy or right settings. So those would be coming back in July and August. They have already requested so. and there is no problem with that. But the great majority has been performing very well, and I'm very happy to report on that if you want. So if we continue, then we have the roadmap to the next conference that was already mentioned by my two predecessors in the speaking role. So as you know, after the WRC-19 finished and they defined the agenda of the next conference, there was the first meeting of the CPM, which was chaired by Cindy, where the, let's say, the work, the studies, and all the tasks in order to prepare for the following conference were assigned to the study groups and other groups. And then this work, if we go to the next one, has started. There you go. In the ITUR level, let's say, in the ITUR study groups, which are these 6 groups that you see there, and their subordinate groups, working parties and other groups. And at the regional level, as you can see in the right side of the slide, what Tariq mentioned, which is the meetings of the regional groups. Also, Cindy mentioned the CETEL meetings, and Tariq mentioned the ASMG meetings. There are 4 other regional groups representing Africa, Europe, Asia, and the CIS countries. So these 6 regional groups meet and they consolidate national preferences or positions into regional ones. And then those regional ones are being discussed at the study group level, at the conference, as consolidated proposals. The way forward would be to go to CPM2, as you can see below the dotted triangle, rectangle, which is scheduled at the beginning of 2023, and then going to RA and WRC-23, as mentioned, for the conference itself and the assembly that precedes the conference. So in the following slide, we see that, as was mentioned, that all the physical meetings that we normally have in ITUR have gone virtual. We had the first ever virtual meeting of the Radio Regulations Board. This is one of the meetings that we never thought it was going to be virtual, because as you know, the Radio Regulations Board is like the judiciary power in the ITUR. So the judges meet, but they never do that virtually. But there is no other way around. They come from all corners of the world, and there is no way that you can wait until they would be able to travel to a common place. So the first meeting in March of this year was virtual, and we are heading for the next meeting of the RRB in a few days' time, the 6th of July, that will also be virtual. Then the RAG also met virtually, and the study groups and working parties, as you can see there, also met virtually, and the others will follow. We had a bit of a delay in starting this with the study groups, because at the beginning, mid-March, as I mentioned, there was kind of a hesitation in terms of going virtual. People prefer to wait a bit to see what happened, and maybe by postponing the meetings, we could go to physical meetings in the second half of the year. But when we saw that this was not going to happen, because we had different evolutions of the virus in different parts of the world, if we wait until all parts of the world are in a given phase where the measures are relaxed, then it will take many, many months. So that's why we decided to go virtual. Fortunately, all the stakeholders, let's say, supported that with some resistance at the beginning. But today, I could say that most of them are happy. And the ones that are not happy, at least they are convinced that this is the only way out until for the, at least for the time being. So in the next slide, we see that this has not only drawbacks. I mean, we heard from Cindy and Tariq, and I fully share with them that we have some drawbacks because there is more difficulty to interact informally among delegates. There is no social interaction, which is so important in our community, and the meetings are shorter because of the different time zones. But there are also some advantages, and here are some of them. So we have a huge number of participants, much higher than the usual for all the meetings. So the issue of not having to travel to Geneva or to other places where the meeting might be hosted facilitates the participation of people. So for instance, we had a virtual consultation of the council with over 700 participants. This is never the case. We never have more than 250 in Geneva. Then the RAG is always a 100 people meeting, and we have over 200 in the last meeting because it was virtual. And the same is happening in the study groups and the working party meetings. And this is a good aspect of it, that it is more democratic, if you want. It's opening the door for people that would have difficulties in participating to take part of it. Of course, the lower carbon footprint, avoiding traveling, is also an issue for many, very important for some. And we will, I think that this will mark our spirits. And even when we go back to normal, we will continue allowing remote participation, which was something that was very difficult to agree upon in the ITUR. But I think that now people have seen the advantages of it, and I'm sure that one way or another we will have hybrid meetings in the future, meaning some people being able to be physically present in Geneva or elsewhere, and others joining remotely. So we'll have to adapt our framework, our rule framework, for this to be possible. So if we go on, I think that we have already mentioned this. This is some of the challenges, not only the good things, but some of the challenges. One of the challenges is the platforms that we are using. Not all the platforms, I mean, we haven't found an ideal platform. There are connectivity issues with people that are in places where the bandwidth is not ideal. Platforms that are more friendly for connectivity, they lack other features. And in ITU, we always need the interpretation facilities, and not all platforms allow for interpretations, and even less in 6 languages as we need for many meetings. So we are trying to look for an ideal mix of platforms where we could use one for meetings with interpretation, another one for meetings without interpretation, and maybe some other possibility to look for alternatives to this traditional coffee break or consensus building exercises outside the formal meeting of the study group or any other group. If we go on, then the preparation process, as you know, is fed by the technological advances and the user requirements that you can see at the left-hand side of the slide. These are fed into the national interests of the countries and priorities, which is the lower part of the middle rectangle, that are then consolidated into regional ones, as I mentioned before, through the regional groups, and then the ITUR processes gives rise to global proposals in the best of cases that will go to the CPM, which is the conference preparation instance, and then we'll fed the conference together with those list proposals, and then we will have WRC-23 and its main outcome, which is the updated radio regulations. So this cycle takes 4 years, and I think it's important to keep our 4 years as 4 years, because already 4 years is for many members of the industry long, and you know that. We've been hearing this for many years now. Can't you do it more often? Can't you go faster? Technology doesn't wait. We cannot be waiting so long for a conference. We've seen that it's not very, let's say, easy to go faster because we take decisions in a rush, and then those decisions are, let's say, putting back in question in the following conference. So the 4-year cycle is so far the timing that was agreed. I don't want to think about having a longer cycle this time because of COVID. I think that COVID, with all its complications, caught us at the very early stage of our preparations. So even if we are a bit late, it's been the preparatory phase where we assign the work and we distribute and organize the work. So I think it's still time to catch up. And I hope that next year will be much more back into normal and we'll be able to keep the schedule. And there is no intention whatsoever to delay the CPM or the conference. So I've been reassuring everybody about this, and I hope that we'll be able to do that with the resilience that the ITUR community has always shown for any subject. So going on, I think we are already towards the end. As we mentioned, the regional groups have, let's say, went along, have gone along with this new approach. Tariq told us as the meeting of the ASMG at the beginning of the year, they were the first group to meet, and they were the only group to be able to meet before the COVID stroke. So they had a face-to-face meeting, and congrats for that. And then all other groups are facing this virtual meeting reality. So CTEL has done it back in May, and then CEPT has done it just a few days ago in June. But the other regional groups are doing the same. So everybody is trying to play the game, and I hope that, as I said, that this will be rewarded with the results that we are hoping for. So again, if we advance, I think that the following slide, go ahead. Yes, it was already mentioned by both Cindy and Tariq. The agenda was established by WRC-19, and the council has, let's say, endorsed it, but we are still waiting for the exact dates and venue of the conference within the UAE in order to have the full decision on the conference dates, venue, and agenda. And I think that's the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Can you go ahead? Yes, well, this last slide is to invite you all to participate in these activities. You know, the richness of our community is that it's not only government, it's also industry and international organizations, and it's also academia members, and that makes the richness of the ITUR and the value of what it produces. So all of you that are listening and you are not yet one of these three categories, in one of these three categories of members, you are cordially invited to join and to contribute to our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mario, for your insightful presentation. So now we can move on to the Q&A part of the webinar. So I can see some questions coming in. The first one actually is for Cindy. So Cindy, as a chair of CPM 23, you have you considered pushing back the 2022 deadline for draft CPM text in light of the delayed start to the study work?
Thank you. Yes, I certainly have, but I think this was on one of my slides where the dates are set working backwards from WRC-23. I certainly have always been a big proponent of let's have the most amount of time possible for the studies. So you will know at RA, Canada is always one of those countries trying to shorten the length of time between the different things. But we do have to follow what is in Resolution ITUR 2-8. We do need to ensure that the final text is available 6 months ahead of the WRC, and that sets the date for CPM. And then we do need to ensure that the text is available 2 months ahead of CPM in the 6 official languages. And so that sets our time frame, taking into account how long it takes for the translation of all of the text which comes in English. So I will, of course, make sure that the date is as far along as I can push it once we have the other dates set. But we do have to respect what is in the resolution too.
Thank you. Our second question, I think this is for Mario. So ICANN, which I think it's the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, have been rotating time-based for their virtual meetings. So in other words, ensuring all regions share bad and good timings. So is this something the IT should consider?
Well, what we are doing is that the meetings that are mainly global and that have let's say, equal participation from all sides of the world, or mainly the extreme regions like the Americas in one side and the Far East, Asia and Australia in the other side, we concentrate the meeting in the core hours here in Europe, so that the people from the West have to let's say wake up early, and the people in the East have to go to bed late, but nobody is forced to follow a meeting during the sleep time, let's say. This is for the big meetings. Now, there are smaller meetings of interest groups that are more, let's say, centered in one of those regions. So for those meetings, we give them freedom to, let's say, schedule the meeting at the time that is more convenient for the majority of the group. So there are meetings where you have mostly Asians participating, and then they do it, let's say, in the morning here in Geneva, which would be terrible for the West. And then the other way around. We also have some people that are meeting in the afternoon or late afternoon, because they are mainly, let's say, from the Western side. But this is for the small groups that are more, let's say, regionally based. But as our audience is mostly global, it's very difficult to do that. And so sometimes we just ask for the indulgence of some of them in order to let us go further or to start a bit earlier. And it depends on the group. If some people are very cooperative and they allow us to do so, and others say, no, I cannot do earlier than this or later than that, and then we stick to that. This has a consequence in the productivity, of course, but well, I think we cannot impose anybody to be working from 3 to 4 a.m., let's say. It's not,
Thank you. I have a question for Tarek. It says that within ASMG, there are two distinct sub-regions, the Gulf countries who belong to the GCC and North African members of ATU. Do these diverse sub-regions make achieving common ASMG positions more difficult? Do you think remote working will complicate this?
No, nothing. Most of the time that when we are having this kind of meeting at GCC, and we are taking care of ASMG group, and ASMG when go to that, they're taking almost, we haven't find any difficulties in all our meetings to accept the GCC contribution. Sometimes GCC change their position when they go to the ASMG because we know more information. So that will be same thing will happen for the remote or virtual meeting. So there is no change and no difficulties in that one.
Thank you. We have an open question, so feel free to respond to this question. So do panelists think these disruptions, such as lack of informal chat, will make these discussions at WRC-23 even more challenging?
well, I might go at it if you want.
Please.
I don't envisage that this will continue like that until WRC-23. In other words, if we are if we are not able to organize any face-to-face meeting, and we meet for the first time at CPM 23-2 or at the WRC, I agree that it will be a huge challenge. But not only because we didn't have informal chat, because I think that the hard decisions that are going to be taken at a given point is going to be very difficult to do it only virtually. So my point of being at the beginning of the study cycle is that there are no hard decisions. There are no irreversible decisions to be taken at this point. At this point, we are mainly organizing the work and starting with the first steps of the studies. But when time comes closer to the conference to start taking decisions, then doing it virtually is going to be really a drawback. So I don't expect this to continue for 3 years, let's say. So I hope that if it's not at the beginning of next year, then by the end of next year, we'll be able to go back to normal, even if the virus is still there. And I hope that a vaccine will be out by then. Some say there will be at the end of the year. Maybe this is too optimistic, but Certainly by let's say during 2021, we will have a vaccine. I hope, I trust humankind. And when the vaccine is out there, then this will be over. So I hope that this will happen at the latest by the end of next year. So we will have 22 and 23 normal, let's say, years. If not, it's really going to be challenging. I agree.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, so I agree with what Mario had said, that if we don't have some way of mitigating that, ensuring that we can actually find a way to even replace those in-person hallway chats and informal chats that we have, and that's why I asked that as a question, like how do we do that? And I believe that Tarek actually had some points on that in his slides and in his discussion about one of the things being that we need to have more bilateral and multilateral meetings of the regional groups. But I also think as well, just not just the regional groups, but amongst countries as well, that there are a lot of countries that have similar thinkings on agenda items and can perhaps have some discussions around those informally, and then meet with other countries that might be in a group, because it's not always a regional disposition, I guess. But we do have to find a way of working in these times in order to mitigate the fact that we don't have that ability to go out for a hallway coffee and discuss things. So I'm always open to trying to find new ideas if anybody has them. So if they do, they can put them in the chat, and then we can perhaps pursue those.
Thank you. Another open question, so feel free to respond to this. There's so many questions, so maybe we can address another one, and then we can respond to the others at a different time. So the open question is that, can you identify what metric will be used to decide on whether or not a delay in the dates for WRC will be necessary?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, for one, I am unconsciously not thinking about it, as I said, because I think we should take this out of our minds. For the WRC-23 to be postponed, in my view, the preparations would have to be disastrous. And I don't think this will be the case. In previous conferences, we've had the situation where a given agenda item or the studies regarding a given agenda item was not considered sufficient by the conference. And then this issue was not considered at the conference and was postponed. This was a decision of the conference itself. So this might happen with one item or two. I hope not, but might happen. But I don't see all the preparations failing in order for us to take a decision of postponing the conference. So the conference is not only what I just said about the impact in the industry and the credibility of ITU and the WRC process, and what is very important is the predictability of what we do. So everybody knows what we do, when we do it, and when it is going to be ready. So disrupting that is not good. It has also to do with our arrangement with our host country. So Tariq and the TRA are going to commit with the venue on the organization of this conference for the date that would be set and for the place that would be chosen. And this will be a firm commitment, because if not, they will not be able to let's say, to have the assurance that the venue will be at their disposal. So by postponing the conference, we are also, let's say, providing a big hit to the organizers, to our hosts, which is not fair either. So that's why I see that this is a really last resort, but a very last resort in case of a real catastrophe in the preparation of the studies. I don't see this happening, and what I see as the worst case scenario is that we will get to the conference, and maybe one or two agenda items will be considered not sufficiently studied and postponed, or any alternative solution to those, but the main bulk of the conference items will be treated and discussed. This is my feeling, let's say, my view on it.
Thank you. There are so many questions. I'll do another one and then we can wrap up. Following on Cindy and Tarek's comment, is the ITU actually considering establishing any additional multilateral or regional meetings?
Well, I think will be depend on the request of regional groups, but I'm sure my friend Mario, they will help us in order to organize these kind of meetings, because at the end we need one organization who can organize or arrange these meetings. But if any regional group will ask for having such meeting, we will request ITU, and ITU, I'm sure they will help us in order to arrange this meeting. But I'm looking that there will be many multilateral meetings, not only bilateral, multilateral meetings between the regional groups. And within the regional group, there will be other meetings. For example, now ASMG, although we had a meeting this February, but I'm already now arranging another meeting, virtual meeting this year, maybe one or two, to see how we can, our preparation, what we are doing, and where we are right now, and to give updates. So it will be better. But again, come back, ITU can support us in that one.
Absolutely. If I may, I fully agree with that. And I think this is a great idea. And I would really take it on board and try to facilitate more let's say the regions themselves will increase probably the frequency of their meetings, as Tariq said, and Cindy as well, I think. But what I can do is to facilitate the cross fertilization between regions and groups of countries by inviting inter-regional meetings and multi-region meetings, which is a great idea. I like it. We'll do it.
Thank you very much. So, so we've seen over the past few weeks that a number of IT regional meetings have been successfully held virtually, and work is continuing in these groups. And an adjustment to our working methods has to be made. So, for example, what ITU, as Maria mentioned, is that they're splitting the meetings into separate sessions over a longer period. And additional electronic tools provided by the organizers supports and facilitates the work of the virtual meetings. But the question is whether on a medium or long-term basis, this will affect the decision-making and the regulatory harmonization. So as this presented by our guest speakers, maybe increasing maybe increase the frequency of discussions online, but with limited focus. And maybe it's best to accelerate the regional and sub-regional consents to enable more mature discussion. So as we heard from our guest speakers, there's some advantages, there's some disadvantages. But we all know that everyone has to adapt to the new reality, but we have seen a significant upside. So there's been a higher and more diverse participation in the virtual meetings, and this can lead to a greater consensus. So to wrap up for today, again, we want to thank you again to our panel members and to all of who joined us for making this a valuable discussion. We will aim to respond to any questions that remained unanswered, and sorry for the lack of time. We received quite a lot of questions, so we will make sure to respond to those questions, and we will send you the recording and slides from the presentation early next week. Hope you are all keeping well and staying positive, and goodbye to everyone. Thank you.